What's up? I'm John Middlekauff, the host of the 3 and Out podcast, and you can find it below in the description. Also, you're watching this on the Volumes YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe right now. Share with your friends. Okay, let's dive around the league. I don't even know where to start, but this was a team that, I've been very bullish on for years. An organization and definitely a general manager, that I think is considered a scout, high-level guy. People like him. He's done a good job. But sometimes, the reality of a team is something's off. Something is wrong. And now dating back to the final 2 games in 2021, or I guess 21. I guess we're in 22 now. The Indianapolis Colts lost to the Raiders, and then in a must-win game in Jacksonville, they lost. Obviously, this year they opened up with a tie against the Texans, who most people thought was going to be pretty bad, and they lost to the Jags again. So in their last 4 games, with Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan, they are 0-3-1 with 2 losses to the Jags, a team that consistently drafts basically number 1 overall. I mean, their last 2 picks have literally been number 1 overall. Now, they have a credible coach. They're a much better operation. Let's face it. Trevor Lawrence, I was thinking this yesterday, flipping around my new Sunday ticket. First time I've ever got Sunday tickets. So, I'm flying around. I don't have to rewatch games, watching Red Zone, blah, 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 flying around on the... Trevor Lawrence, the gap between him and the other 4 cats in that draft class is going to widen like the Grand Canyon over the next year. It ain't even going to be close. So, maybe as it ages, it's not a terrible loss. But when you lose 24-0, your head coach, I've been saying this for a while. I don't know him. I've never met him. Clearly is well thought about. Was a longtime backup quarterback. Had a historic moment when he filled in for Jim Kelly with the Buffalo Bills. Was an integral part as an assistant coach on an Eagles team that won the Super Bowl first time in franchise history. People like him. He's a good guy. But you got to separate, listen, Andy Reid's a good guy. He's also a really good coach. Mike Tomlin, a good guy. Pretty damn good coach, right? You can be a good guy and a good coach. There have been a lot of good guys that couldn't coach themselves out of a wet paper bag. And I think we need to start asking ourselves the question, does Frank know what he's doing? And I don't mean can he just coach a team? Can he win? They missed the playoffs last year. They're lucky they're not dead or anything at 0-2, even though they look completely lifeless because their division, I'm recording this part before the Titans game, but regardless, Titans they didn't win the first week, and I think we all know they're a little worse than they have been over the previous years. The Jags might be the best team in the division. Well, the Jags don't get to play the Colts every week because when the Jags don't play the Colts, they're going to be a little more human. But is Frank Reich good? To me, that's just a question. And listen, the owner, who is batshit crazy, who, was caught a couple years ago with drugs and cash. Let's face it, the dude's got some issues outside of the office. I don't know if Jim Irsay, very entertaining. I like his Twitter account. It makes me laugh. But I don't know if he's the most stable individual. Now, in fairness to him, he's hired really well over the years. Hired Bill Polian. They drafted Peyton Manning. They kind of lucked into Andrew Luck, hired Ryan Grigson and Pagano. That was a disaster. He hired Chris Ballard, who everyone would have hired. He was like the number 1 GM on the market. But we're seeing George Paton was the Chris Ballard of the last couple years. We all admit George Paton's doing a pretty good job. George Paton's doing a really good job drafting players. He kind of did a no-brainer trade, what felt like for Russell Wilson. Hired Nathaniel Hackett. Who you are as a GM is more than just the fucking draft, right? I think we love just how do you draft? Well, the most 2 important things you can do is find a quarterback and find a coach. Now, in fairness to Ballard on Frank, different than Patton with Nathaniel Hackett, is that he had hired Josh McDaniels, and then Josh McDaniels clearly left him at the altar. His back was against the wall. But this isn't working. It feels kind of over. Now, one thing that's a little out of their control, when they both got the job, they thought Andrew Luck was going to be the quarterback and he retired. But then they have made some mistakes. Clearly the most effective guy that they got was kind of an over-the-hill Phillip Rivers. Led them to 11 wins to the playoffs. And they had a chance to win that playoff game against the Ravens. Jacoby, let's face it, is a backup. Carson Wentz, people think he's weird and teammates don't like and the owner couldn't stand. Matt Ryan. So the coach we don't think is any good, which I don't know how you could think that at this current time. Matt Ryan has had a fantastic career. I'll never forget being at Cal Poly, living on this Hathaway Street. It was the party street. Watching on like a Thursday night. It was either Thursday or Friday night. The Matt Ryan Boston College game where they were down 14 points with like 3 minutes to go and he threw 2 crazy touchdowns. They ended up winning the game. It's like, who the hell is this guy? Turned out to be the number 3 overall pick. Became Matt Ryan, MVP, playoff guy. It's over. Like, he's shot. And here's the other thing that Matt Ryan now on this team, that in some of his moments with Roddy White and Tony Gonzalez and Julio Jones, like, they don't have any weapons. They have a really good running back who's an elite player. But when Pittman's out, like, let's face it, I like Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman's probably a 2. Like, they're not a very explosive offense. And they've kind of hung their hat on defense the last couple of years. Well, you're losing 24-0. Like, you got to score points to have a chance to win an NFL game. The Colts are in shambles. I think the coach is headed down a path that he's going to get fired. And then the question is, I wouldn't fire Chris Ballard. I would give him another chance. Usually GMs get multiple coaches. I would give him the opportunity to hire a different coach, but it's also on Chris. Like, you keep going to bat for this guy. Eventually, we gotta admit what's really going on, right? Sometimes parents do this a lot. They like to stay in denial about a child. We do this a lot in society, right, with our significant other, denial about the way our relationship's going. Sometimes the GM, even if you like the guy personally, and I understand being in a business relationship with someone you like a lot personally, but the business is pretty black and white. You're either having success or you're not. You're either winning or you're not. And right now, it's a fucking disaster. So I think Chris Ballard's kind of got to look himself in the mirror and go, does he have the capability, turn on sounds too strong, but to fire Frank? Because that might be the way that he saves his job. Because I would not fire Chris Ballard. But if Chris Ballard is going to like jump in front of the firing line for Frank Reich, then maybe he deserves to get fired. So, I mean, Chris got to do some internal thinking here because, like, Indy is just, they're not good. To me, it starts with the quarterback in the offense, which is the head coach's deal. Someone that actually is, I don't know if they're good or not. I still, I thought they were going to be a top 5 drafting team. You win 4 or 5 games in the first couple months. Like, you might end up with 6 or 7 wins. I watched the Giants. Like, I do not like their quarterback, but their team is tough. Think about this. I was thinking about this with Brian Daboll. I went this morning, Monday morning, to his Wikipedia page. And I don't think some people might not realize this. He's been in the National Football League since 2000. He's been coaching on Sundays for over 20 years. He's only 47 years old. So since he was about 26, 27, he's been in the NFL. And I think a lot of people consider him a Belichick guy. Well, let's think about 2 Belichick guys. We'll dive into the Raiders, who were 0-2, and the Giants, who were 2-0. Now, I saw Josh McDaniels say after the game, we have to learn how to win. I had to read that twice. Josh, you're inheriting a 10-win team. Max Crosby, Derek Carr, Hunter Renfrow, those guys won literally last year. Colton Miller, your players, Chandler Jones played for the Patriots and the Cardinals. They were in the playoffs last year. So your core players not only know how to win, they literally did it last year on this team. And then the number 1 guy you traded for, I don't know, has won 13 games a year just the last 3 years. The Packers have been the number 1 seed 2 out of the last 3 years. So your core Raider guys and then acquiring Devontae Adams, they literally all know how to win. And I said week 1, like, I put that thing on Derek, right? You can't overcome a guy throwing a bunch of picks. It's hard to overcome Daniel Jones, who's really not doing much. But if you don't turn the ball over, like Tom Brady the other day, and Jameis does, in a tight game, you're going to win. And Derek Carr, it was his fault week 1. Well, I'm watching week 2, like, I'm sorry, this is Josh McDaniels. Like, hey, Josh, you're up 23-7. Your offense is humming. You got to win that game. Under no circumstances, a team, like, obviously Kyler pulled some you-know-what out of who knows where, but he did, and he's a remarkable talent. But up 23-7 in the third quarter, when a team is basically tapping out, you cannot lose. Like, that thing's on Josh McDaniels. And think about Josh McDaniels and Brian Daboll. The only success Josh McDaniels has ever had has been with Bill Belichick. That's the only time. And I think we have a long history now to kind of realize that the Belichick coaching cocoon in New England has been pretty awesome for those guys. But the moment they get out of the cocoon, they struggle. I saw it when I got to Cal Poly. A lot of guys struggled with drugs and drinking and other stuff that it's like they had never seen in their life. And I'm not pounding my chest here, not proud of everything, but by the time I got to college, like in high school, I'd done a lot. I'd lived a little bit. Part of it was like my parents just allowed me to just kind of, make my own decisions. I'm not saying they weren't strict or whatever, but I wasn't by any means living in some cocoon. So when I got to Cal Poly and I saw some pretty crazy things, if I would have seen them for the first time, who knows? Maybe I get overwhelmed. Maybe I fail out of school. I don't know. But when I got there, I was pretty kind of, in a weird way, I'm not trying to act like I was super mature, but I was mature to the sense of it was easy for me not to go out drinking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was easy for me to say no to drugs. I had been around them for 3 or 4 years in high school. And I think a lot of guys get overwhelmed with that. I know a ton of people in my experience that got to college and failed out and transferred and couldn't handle it, right? Just like a lot of Belichick's guys get to the league, get their own job, and they're completely overwhelmed, and they utterly fail. They utterly fail. I think it's fair to say that Matt Patricia, Eric Mangini, some of these guys are probably not as dumb as the way we talk about them. And Josh McDaniels, I think, is the guy that we hold to the highest regard because of like his deal with Tom Brady, the offense. Yet he finally gets an opportunity with a team that won 10 games last year, and now he's 0-2, and it's just like, what is going on? Where Brian Daboll, who is considered a Belichick guy, I went to his Wikipedia page. I knew some of it. He went so many different places. He went to the Browns. He went to the Dolphins as an offensive coordinator, and he failed. He's obviously a Saban guy too, and that he went to Nick Saban in 2017 and was the offensive coordinator after going back to New England. So he'd kind of been like a Joe Judge. Only had success in New England and with Saban. But then his major difference is he went to a non-Belichick guy in 2018, a guy named Sean McDermott, and he got around Josh Allen. And for 4 years outside of the Belichick cocoon, he got to just have experiences. He got to learn. He got to develop a quarterback. He got to fail a little bit, and he obviously got to have a lot of success. And to me, I'm always a huge believer in the impact of experience. We're seeing it with Trey Lance. Like, to me, Trey Lance has looked in a short time completely overwhelmed. It's way too fast for him. And the reason is he has no experience. Like, why can Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts or some of these guys Josh Allen looks so comfortable running around? Because they have instincts because they've been doing it for so long. Trey really hasn't. He doesn't even have the reps in college. So the experience you have when you're a coach going different places, Kyle Shanahan, I just worked for his dad in Washington. And then he worked like 3 other places before he became a head coach. And that really benefits any human being. The more, like, when I left the NFL, I worked in radio. Now I've been doing the Collins stuff. Like, I've got to do multiple different, I got to dabble in TV locally in San Francisco. I kind of got to dabble my hands in different things. It's made me much more capable in 2022 because all the things I got to experience under the media umbrella. I didn't just become a podcaster in 2013 and it all worked out. No, I tried this. I failed at this. I did a little bit of this. Didn't like this. And that is a big deal. Like, I'm not saying Josh McDaniels, I don't believe in the guy because everyone I know that have been around him, they think too highly of him. I've played golf with guys that have played for Josh McDaniels. They fucking love him. They think he's a really high-level guy. But I'm sorry, like, I got to, like, question, is he just going to kick ass and take names? Where Brian Daboll, his team is not very talented. Even Giants fans, you guys would have to admit, like, you're not the most talented team, and you don't even have a quarterback. Yet I'm watching, because I bet on the Panthers. I literally bet against the guy. And to me, as what I do now, when I learn the most about another team, when I can really dissect them, is when I'm either gambling on them or gambling against the team. And I've been impressed. I mean, the bald dude just kind of knows what he's doing. Of course he does. He's been around the block a few times. So while he's under 50, just go to his Wikipedia page, all over the place. But I don't think we can discount how much he probably grew as a coach over the last 4 years outside of the Belichick and even the Saban cocoon. Because let's face it, for 20 plus years, if you coached under Belichick, you won. And for the last 10, if you coached under Nick, you won. But it doesn't guarantee when you leave them that you're going to win. And when you go to other places and you also have success, then maybe you're just a good coach. Maybe Brian Daboll, I don't know, is just a good coach. And I think about 2 years ago, I think Brian Daboll, Wright, and Tom Telesco, or I guess it was Greg Roman. It was Greg Roman that him and Telesco went to school. But remember, Brian Daboll was in the mix for the Charger job, and they went with Brandon Staley instead. You don't think if you were a Charger fan with Justin Herbert, you'd rather have Colin's been talking about this for a long time. You watch the Chargers play, like, where is the innovation? What are we doing? You're just dinking and dunking? Can you imagine if you had Brian Daboll there instead of a defensive head coach? And listen, I'm not acting like Brandon Staley isn't a good defensive coach now that they got players. Their defense looks awesome. But their offense just leaves a little something to be desired. To me, I always lean offense when I got a quarterback. Every single time. Every single time. If I'm hiring from scratch. I get, like, if you have Harbaugh or Tomlin, some of these guys are already there. But I'm saying if I'm starting from scratch and I'm hiring the coach, I think he'd like a redo. So the Giants, impressive. The Raiders, what a terrible loss. And talking about non-impressive is the Denver Broncos. And I think people thought I was nuts when I picked them to come in fourth. Now, it's pretty clear them and the Raiders are probably going to battle it out for that, that distinction for season's end. And they both got some things going for them, and they both got some question marks. But one thing is very clear, that Nathaniel Hackett is completely over his head. He has been, through 2 games, an utter disaster. I mean, an utter disaster. And speaking of, like, the Daboll, Josh McDaniels, think about Nate Hackett, who was not viewed anywhere near being a head coach in the league up until the last couple years, when he was part of an operation as the offensive coordinator where not only did he not call plays, the head coach did, but they were playing with one of the great quarterbacks and really one of the great players in the history of sports, who completely resurrected his career and started becoming an MVP again and just kicked ass, took names, and dominated everyone. Nate Hackett, gregarious guy, big smile, seems really likable. And like I said with Frank Reich, there is sometimes you got to separate, I really like this guy, I love his energy. Does he have any clue what he's doing? Because I flip on the Broncos game yesterday. I watched it I didn't watch the whole thing, and this morning I watched it, but with no sound. But yesterday, I flip it on while the game's going on. And the first play that I get to is Nate Hackett, the Broncos call a timeout. And it's punt. But they're not the punting team, they're the punt return team. And even the announcer's like, why did he call? Oh, they did not have a punt returner on the field. So it's one thing, the clock management. Like, I do believe that, and listen, I'm guilty as well, is that we are very critical of clock management. It's pretty clear that's hard. Every guy, every academic on their couch watching TV thinks they could be a head coach. None of them could sniff doing the job. Not absolutely none of them. But, and listen, I'm guilty too. I scream at the television to call timeouts. It feels like some basic things. But I think we have a long history now that the overwhelming majority of coaches struggle with it. It's fast. You're on the field. You're not relaxed on a couch. It's hard. So even if I gave them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, when you do things like consistent penalties and then things like guys not being on the field, that is a direct reflection of coaching and communication, which ultimately is on the coaching staff and the head coach to communicate everything to the players. The Belichick New England mantra is you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. So anything that happens is being allowed by the coaching staff. That's the way this sport works. This is not the NBA where it's like, hey, Kevin Durant, just dribble around, scores 50, dog. Go get it. Go get it, LeBron. Carry our ass in the playoffs. It's like that's not how NFL works. Every single play of every single game, there is a play call. Now, part inside plays, like part of Kyler Murray is his insane instincts. Lamar Jackson. It's what I question with Trey Lance. Like, does he have any instincts? Like, there is even in every play, sometimes you have to ad-lib. If everyone in the business community just did what academia told us in theories on the whiteboard, supply, demand, we'd all be in the gutter. Because a lot of the great companies and the way our society functions is because of people that trusted their gut, trusted their instincts, and didn't act on the black and white advice, right? If you do this, this will happen. That's not the way the world works, right? No different than a play call. If I call whatever the play call is, this guy's going to be open against that coverage. And in theory, he should be. But then all of a sudden, the DB cheats or the wide receiver falls, and he's not. Does the quarterback freak out? Or does he go, no, I know what to do. I'll scramble around. I'll throw it to this guy. I'll point this out. You got to be an instinctive football player. You cannot be a robot. No different than being a head coach. And I don't think you can learn to be a great head coach. One, there is only a small percentage of people that even have the capability to succeed at doing it. And then I think clearly early on with some guys, this guy doesn't have it. This guy is completely overwhelmed. And one of their biggest problems might not even just be the head coach. It might be the quarterback is a shell of himself. Because separate from what we've talked about of being a weird guy and just being a little out there and not being the most relatable human, which I'm sorry, I think is pretty important at quarterback. Brady has it. Even Rodgers, clearly, guys get along with him. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar, these guys relate with their guys. You can't, you can be stern on guys that are still, I don't know, your homies, your friends, people that, admire you, that look up to you, that want to hang out with you. You kind of got to hang out with other people. It's part of the deal. You can't just isolate yourself. Now, if you are going to be like that, you better be elite. You better be elite, right? Let's just say Steph Curry, hypothetically, was a weirdo. No one liked him. He's good enough that he could probably overcome it. Now, he happens to be an incredible teammate. People love him, and everyone gets along with him. But if you're going to be the best of the best, you can get along with being a little out there. The moment you're not as great and you're a weirdo, I'm sorry, it's over. And to me, I'm watching him. If Russell Wilson used to be a 9, right, a 9 out of 10, right? If Rodgers and Brady and Mahomes were 10s, I never thought he was on that level, but he was damn good. He was consistently somewhere between the 4th to 6th best quarterback. And on a given week, he could be the best player in the league. Well, I'm watching a guy that just doesn't look the same. And part of it, having watched 2 Seattle games this year, DK Metcalf, when he got to the Seattle, he kind of helped make Russell look even better. Well, why do you think that is? I don't know. He's 6'4", he's 225 pounds, and he runs a 4.0 40. He is, one of the biggest physical freaks we've ever seen, like a Julio, like a Terrell Owens. And I see Russell Wilson throwing up these balls like it's DK Metcalf, and it ain't DK Metcalf. So you know what happens? It's not working. I watch Russell's deep ball. It still looks beautiful in the air. You know what the problem is sometimes? Wide receivers covered. There's a DB right there. Doesn't work as well. Now, I know they've had some wide receiver injuries, but the simple reality is that for the majority of Russell's career, before DK showed up, they had random wide receivers. I mean, Baldwin's a solid player. I like Doug Baldwin, right? Golden Tate had some moments, but they never had a guy like that. They had a guy like that, and Russell even took the next step, especially those first 2 years with DK. It was Russell Wilson. They give him all this money. They make the trade. I don't blame them for making that trade. I think it was a pretty no-brainer trade to make. If you and I ran Denver and we were presented with, hey, you can trade us Woods and Fant and give us a couple ones, here, give me Russell Wilson. I would have done it too. But just because you would have done it doesn't mean 6 months later, 2 years later, it might turn out to be a disaster. And of course, once they make the trade, they're going to pay him. So I understand why they did all this, but it's not looking good. And, I like the Niners. I did not like the Niners at all this week. I thought before Trey Lance got hurt, I had this game circled of thinking, this is a game that Trey's got 3 picks, overwhelmed, and the Broncos just smother them. Now I look at the game and I go, yeah, I like the Niners to win. Kyle Shanahan versus Nate Hackett. Jimmy Garoppolo is much more comfortable in a crazy environment on the road. Denver's already turning on their team. Don't blame them. I never blame fans who are the consumers, and the reason this all exists. Without the fans watching and going to the games, there would be zero money. This would be just, no different than pickup football. That's what it is. It's the billion-dollar business because of the consumer. And the consumer gives a shitload of their time, and their time now equals a shitload of money for the league. And when I give you a lot of time and you're an embarrassment, I don't understand booing, guys that get injured, or if a team's playing well and you have a tough loss. But when you're blowing timeouts and there's no punt returner and Russell Wilson's getting delay of games, like, I'm sorry. I support the fans on this one. They're in the right on this one. Because the Denver Broncos, if you're 40 years old, like, you know what good football looks like and you know what terrible football looks like. It wasn't that long ago that Peyton Manning had a high-level operation there with Denver. And listen, we're all watching this. They feel like a low-level team right now. They clearly have some talent. I said it over and over. Everyone, Coward picked them to be like the second-best team in the league. I can't just pick a team, even if they get Russell Wilson, just because they got really good players, when those really good players have never won. We have a long history in sports, baseball, basketball, and football, team sports. I'm sure hockey too. I'm not a hockey fan. Where teams that have a lot of talent never win anything, right? Sometimes the Patriots historically were not the most talented teams, especially that second iteration of the championship teams. Like Julian Edelman was their best receiver. I know they had Brady in Gronk, but they didn't have Lawrence Taylor and Ray Lewis walking through that door. But they were winners. They understood how to win and make winning plays. I'm watching the Broncos going, I don't know, man. I don't see it. And then I know we all question their coach, like, does he know how to teach them to make winning plays? And then you got Russell being kind of a weirdo, screaming at people to do weird things. So who knows if it's going to work? I don't know. But I look a little differently at the AFC West. Josh McDaniels, do I have a lot of faith? I've lost some. The Denver Broncos, they're worse than I thought. I picked them to go fourth, but I still thought they'd win 9 games. I just thought that Chiefs or the Chargers would win 12 or 13. You know, other team would win 11, Raiders would win 10, and that team would win 8 or 9. Now it's like, who knows? If you told me that they went 6 and 11, and it's just a historical disaster at coach, like, we've seen it before. Oh, last but not least, I watched this game, so I want to talk about it. The Bengals and the Cowboys. 2 takeaways from the Cowboys. Cooper Rush, good player. You know, we've seen him make 2 starts. He's won 2 games. How many backups? Jimmy Garoppolo is not a backup. That's a very unique situation. Like a true backup. Chase Daniel, Chad Henne, Cooper Rush can just, their last 2 starts, they're 2-0. And different than that Minnesota start last year, watching him against the Bengals, like, I took away, like, this guy's a pretty good player. He has a good arm. He's pretty accurate. He's very poised. I was impressed. Especially, I had to look up. I'm like, did he get drafted? No, he's an undrafted free agent. Now, I'm not acting, and I'm sure people have said it, like, he's already better than Dak. I'm not saying that. But if that's your backup, I will give the Cowboys a lot of credit. That is an excellent backup. That is an excellent contingency plan. And there's an element of luck because of the COVID year, and the dude didn't play. Because I do think if he played his junior year for Penn State, there isn't a snowball's chance in the hottest part of hell that Micah Parsons makes it past 11 teams. I think it's absolutely impossible. It would never happen. I think if you redo that draft, the 49ers might have traded 3 first-rounders to get him. You know, if you could, hey, Kyle, who would you take? I think we take Micah Parsons instead of Trey Lance. I would say, yes, that would be a good move. Guy's incredible. I don't even know. You know, Von Miller is a stand-up guy, was so fast. This guy has speed like that and the ability to bend, but he's also so powerful. He's got this power like he's, I wouldn't quite say like peak Khalil Mack, but he's got some power like that. He is a dominant player. So when I watch the Cowboys, I go, you know who's really carrying them? Dan Quinn and Micah Parsons. Because never forget when Mike McCarthy got the job, I remember thinking, this is the most insane thing I've ever seen. Just because this guy 15 years ago hired you, you're going to make him your defensive coordinator? And remember, it was a historical disaster in Mike Nolan. I spotted that thing from the moon. I mean, it's like, what are we doing here? Completely disaster. It was even worse than I thought. Immediately fired. And then, like, am I giving Mike McCarthy that much credit? I would imagine the Jones, kind of a no-brainer. Once he got fired, they hired Dan Quinn. It's changed their franchise. It's given them a chance because offensively, CD looked a lot better against the Bengals. Their best running back, and I don't even think it's that close, is number 20. Pollard is dramatically faster than Zeke. And I like Zeke. I'm not like some Zeke hater. I love a good physical back. I love a guy that can catch. I love a guy that will block. Like, I respect Zeke a lot. I do, because I think playing running back at the level in which he plays it in terms of his physicality is so hard. You're constantly taking on linebackers, helping with defensive linemen, taking on hits. Like, he's lost a step because of all the pounding. I have a lot of respect for Zeke. But the other guy's way better, and he's way more explosive. CeeDee Lamb, I think Schultz got hurt, but defensively, their DBs make plays left and right, and 11 is all over the field. Now, I know the Bengals, like, their offensive line's got issues. Listen, did he catch lightning in a bottle last year, Zach Taylor? Like, is Zach Taylor good? I don't know. Because I watched Burrow. He's awesome. Their two receivers are sweet. I had no clue. I underestimated Higgins in college. I thought it was like, I wouldn't say an overdraft, but I was like, I don't know. And he's been fantastic. And Jamar is a dominant player, and Mixon's a stud. I mean, they got weapons everywhere. But offensive line-wise, they are really struggling. Now, granted, like Anthony Munoz might be hit or miss with Micah Parsons right now. I hear a lot of people going, it's sacrilegious to compare him to Lawrence Taylor. Like, guys, we can just admit, like right now, the guy is playing like a Hall of Fame level player. Is he Lawrence Taylor? Of course not. Lawrence Taylor did it for like a decade. But if he keeps playing like this, we'll consider him like the 2020s Lawrence Taylor. Because right now, there is nobody. Like Trent Williams would have problems with the guy. He is a monster. He's got speed. He's got counter moves. He's got spin moves. He's got a power move. He moves around like he's like a running back or a wide receiver in terms of agility. He's a fucking badass. So I don't know the Bengals. Everyone's like, oh, they couldn't block him. Nobody can. But the Bengals are now 0-2. If Zach Taylor was fired tomorrow, I know he went to the Super Bowl last year. Would there be a lot of teams lining up? Would there? I'm not sure. I wouldn't hire him. He wouldn't be my first call. But props to the Cowboys. Literally every game I picked last week from a gambling perspective and then in my own head, I would have missed every single one. That's the hard part about the transition from week 1 to week 2. Everything you see, a lot of it completely swings the other way. But that was a big win for old Mike and Cooper Rush. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description. And make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.